we look forward to welcoming Sweden as a full member of the alliance.
Turkey's acceptance into NATO is certainly a surprise.
We aim to be a security provider to the alliance. We will bring substantial capacities.
And soon, Sweden, the alliance as soon as possible.
Sweden will become the alliance's 32nd country under an agreement reached at a NATO convention in the Lithuanian city of Vilnius, and that will change the balance of power in Europe forever. Turkish President Recep Erdogan played for a long time before agreeing to the Scandinavian country's accession to NATO. His negotiations eventually paid off for him. The United States promised him fighter jets, and the European Union promised him rapprochement and closer relations. However, the biggest benefit is for NATO itself, as Sweden's accession involves changes in the global geopolitical arena. Let's look at the map. The Baltic Sea will soon become an internal body of water for NATO, which gains a significant advantage over Russia here, both in terms of the available fleet and the number of ports for efficient logistics. Sweden's membership also provides a 600-kilometer stretch of airspace extending from the Arctic to the southern Baltic. Sweden has the longest coastline in the Baltic Sea and important ports in the North Sea. Sweden is a link between the eastern NATO countries and the Atlantic.
I have just had a constructive meeting with President Erdogan and Prime Minister Kristersson. I'm glad to announce that as a result, President Erdogan has agreed to forward the accession protocol for Sweden to the Grand National Assembly as soon as possible, and work closely with the Assembly to ensure ratification. This is reflected in the joint press statement just agreed by President Erdogan, Prime Minister Kristersson and myself. Completing Sweden's accession to NATO is an historic step that benefits the security of all NATO allies at this critical time. It makes us all stronger and safer.
Another asset is the defense capabilities of the Swedes. Sweden is a technologically advanced country and has a high-tech defense that includes some of the most modern submarines in the entire North Atlantic Alliance. The Swedes became aware of Moscow's growing aggressiveness when the Russian Air Force simulated a nuclear attack on a facility near Stockholm in 2013, which caused quite a scandal at the time. But it wasn't until last year that Russia's attack on Ukraine ended its enduring commitment to neutrality and began a new chapter in the history of NATO, as well as Sweden itself. Crucial for the alliance will be Gotland, which for Russia is like an unsinkable NATO aircraft carrier that will bury its aspirations in the Baltic Sea. Therefore, in today's material, we will analyze for you what military capabilities Sweden has, how its accession will affect the future of the alliance and its strategy, how the Russians react to it, and why it is one of the most important events of recent years. All this in today's material. I invite you to watch. In 2023, Sweden ranks 37th out of 145 of the countries considered in the annual GFP or Global Firepower Report, which identifies the world's strongest armies. However, every ranking is a different position, wandering somewhere actually between 25 and 40 globally. Sweden's defense budget for 2022 is estimated at $8.6 billion, which is quite a hefty sum, considering that Sweden has a population of only 10 million people.
Yes, this means of course a lot. We are now ordering our 200-year-old policy of being a non-military aligned state. That means a lot, obviously. It also means that we join the alliance at a point in history where things are really standing, at crossroads, and this is important for us as well. We aim to be a security provider to the alliance. We will bring substantial capacities, both when it comes to our armed forces, our naval forces, our air force, which is very strong, and this will mean a lot for the alliance and for the capabilities here in this part of the world.
In addition to geography, which we'll discuss in a moment, the next almost most important element that Sweden brings to the alliance is its naval fleet. Sweden's navy is an example of hedgehog tactics implemented very effectively. Swedish naval forces are therefore not designed to attack, but attacking the Swedes, and by extension NATO, could prove very costly, and enemy losses will be significant. Sweden's accession to NATO will help the alliance repair its weakness in northwestern Europe. Sweden's key to keeping the waters navigable during a conflict is its world-leading submarine fleet, which analysts say has some of the most advanced conventional submarines ever built. The shallow Baltic Sea, called a flooded meadow by some in naval circles, has an average depth of about 60 meters, making it too shallow for the nuclear-powered submarines that make up the bulk of Russia's submarine fleet and the entire U.S. Navy. Sweden has 3 advanced Gotland-class submarines and 1 older model that will be decommissioned when 2 new A-26S are delivered in 2027 and 2028, giving it as many as 5 by the end of the decade. Sweden has been operating submarines in the Baltic since 1904. No neighboring country has been as active underwater as the Swedes. The beginning of the quote, "We have regional knowledge that fills a gap, knowledge that NATO does not have," end of quote, said submarine flotilla commander Frederick Linden.
Strength of submarines, and of course me being biased in that, partial to it, and being here for 32 years, I would say we've been a submarine force since 1904. Mainly operating in the Baltics and the nearby oceans as well. We are throughout that time as well been self-sufficient on technology, crew training, environmental experience as well. So I would say that all in all would be the strength of the Swedish submarine force.
It's now a quite small fleet in compared to what we had in the 70s or 80s, but it's hopefully a more powerful fleet. Ship to ship. So the strength of the Swedish Navy, I'd say, is that they have a littoral capability that few countries have. We have the archipelago in Sweden, very specific terrain for the Baltic. Sweden has it, Finland has it, but the Swedish Navy can operate in these waters. I think that is what makes it stand out.
Sweden has almost the most accurate maps of the Baltic waters, which will be extremely useful in the event of a potential confrontation with Russia, but the latter does not seem to have the slightest chance in a clash with NATO forces in the region, as the fleets in Königsberg and St. Petersburg are almost completely neutralized once Sweden and Finland join in. Any operational action on their side will involve entering well-controlled enemy waters. What else is important when submerged? Conventional submarines operate on battery power. Most must surface after a few days for their diesel engines to run and recharge their batteries. But the Swedish submarines have liquid oxygen on board to power their diesel engines underwater and recharge their batteries so they can stay underwater longer and reduce the risk of detection. Looking further at the Baltic waters, until now, the Danish Strait, which connected the Baltic Sea to the Atlantic Ocean, was partly outside the alliance's control because Swedish waters were neutral. Now, it is also another sea corridor under NATO control. The balance of power and operational possibilities are also changing significantly because of Sweden's Gotland, as well as Finland's Åland Islands. If we superimpose a map of the depth of this sea, we find that where it is deepest and would allow the Russians to cross underwater in the way is first the Danish Strait, then Denmark's Bornholm, then Sweden's Gotland, and right next to the previously mentioned Åland Islands. Russia has almost no chance to send the support of its strongest northern fleet, which is stationed in Murmansk, in the event of a conflict. Therefore, the potential commercial cutoff of Russia, as well as the defense of the Baltics, is now much simpler than it was until recently. Sweden also has an extremely extensive rail network, which is another important asset. In the event of a NATO confrontation with Russia, Finland would be able to count on supplies of NATO equipment faster than before. The Swedes are improving their railroads, allowing a faster crossing to Finland's Torino just short of the border. From here, it is only an hour by rail to Kemijärvi and a maximum of 45 minutes to the Russian border, while only 7 hours remain by road or rail infrastructure to Russia's most important nuclear and naval bastion, the port of Murmansk on the Kolsk Peninsula. What's more, supplies from across the Atlantic can be received at 2 Norwegian ports, specifically in Trondheim and Narvik, and these will later pass through Sweden straight to NATO-Russia borders. NATO itself, after recent enlargements, has gained strategic control over as many as 3 of the most important trade routes, specifically those in the Suez Canal, which handles 20% of world trade, the Bosphorus Canal, which is also one of the busiest routes in the world. Moreover, it is the base for the Russian Black Sea Fleet. In addition, the Arctic route is gaining importance as a result of the retreat of ice in the far north near Greenland, and a NATO-unified Scandinavia could pose a real obstacle to Sino-Russian aspirations in that region of the globe. NATO's U.S. armed forces spend $1.2 trillion a year on armaments, or $200 billion, which is more than all other countries in the world outside the alliance spend. The organization has gained more through the war in Ukraine than anyone could have guessed before Putin's armed invasion of Ukrainian territory began.
President Putin wanted to slam NATO's door shut. Today, we show the world that he failed, that aggression and intimidation do not work. Instead of less NATO, he has achieved the opposite, more NATO.
The Swedish Air Force is extremely strong and will significantly enhance NATO's capabilities in the Arctic region. The Scandinavian countries will have a total of 150 F-35 fighters in the coming years. Added to this will be 39 of Sweden's state-of-the-art JAS-39 Gripen bombers. Together with Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK, there will be between 250 and 300 F-35 fighter jets available in the north. However, while the military aspect is extremely important for the future of NATO, an overlooked issue is also the availability of key raw materials that Sweden is contributing with its accession to NATO structures. Recently, in early 2023, a deposit containing more than 1 million tons of rare earth elements was discovered there. Such a find near Kiruna, a city in northern Sweden, was made by the mining company LKAB. The deposit is so large that it could enable the European Union to become independent of supplies from China or Russia.
This is really an important day for Sweden and for the whole of the European Union.
What we can say today, with what we know today, is by far the largest deposit of REEs in Europe. Total vital for our transformation from combustion engines to electric engines.
Rare earth deposits are the basis for the energy transition and are one of the most important components of armaments and high-tech production such as processors. Sweden also has vast iron resources, which were eagerly used by the Third Reich during World War II. Stopping the supply of this resource was one of the elements that led Hitler's regime to collapse. With Sweden's accession to NATO, these will be further resources over which the alliance will have control, which is extremely important strategically and for the defense industry as a whole. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg considers the accession of Finland and Sweden to the alliance as one of the most important events of the 21st century because this enlargement shows that the alliance is further open to development and that perhaps in a short time, the alliance will also go further beyond the border of Europe. But this will become clear in the coming years as it has united the Atlantic and its reach could be much wider. This is extremely important in an era of growing autocracy in the world. Sergei Lavrov, that is Russia's foreign minister, announces retaliation for these actions. Russians also consider the NATO summit in Vilnius, where these resolutions were made, as the beginning of World War III and the way to end life on Earth.
Мы будем делать, безусловно, выводы в зависимости от того, как быстро и как глубоко НАТО будет осваивать территорию Финляндии и Швеции. В том, что они это собираются делать, уже сомнений нет. Уже и Хельсинки, и Стокгольм обсуждают с Соединенными Штатами многие вопросы, связанные с развертыванием инфраструктуры Альянса прямо вот на границах с Российской Федерацией в случае с Финляндией, но и совсем близко от наших границ в случае со Швецией. Я вас заверю, что все законные интересы в области безопасности Российской Федерации будут обеспечены, соответствующие меры. Мы знаем, какие это меры и как их реализовывать на практике.
These are rather strong slogans, given that not so long ago, Vladimir Putin claimed that the accession of Sweden and Finland posed no threat to the Kremlin. I wonder what this change in narrative is due to.
Теперь в случае размещения там военных контингентов и инфраструктуры мы вынуждены будем отвечать зеркально и создавать такие же угрозы для территорий, откуда создают.
Regardless, NATO is getting stronger and stronger, and people in Europe should be happy with what has happened, as security has also increased dramatically. Let me know what you yourselves think about all this. From my side, that's it for today. Thanks and keep it up. Cheers.